Reclaiming Timeless Ways, another episode on the way. Mike Traster, Simon Fuller, welcome and thank you for joining us today. And hopefully you've enjoyed some of the previous episodes. Mike, I know we've got another good topic in store, and it was funny. Before this episode, we were focusing on, holy cow, I can't believe we've already done so many.
Yeah.
We still have so much to say.
We do.
And just appreciate the fact that hoping that these shows, these topics, these conversations, these stories can in some way help you or somebody you know, and that's really the goal, Mike, and passing that on.
Absolutely. It's two steps. Number one is to you and I have a concrete conversation about experiences in life and observations, and then presenting it in such a, mine is usually more, it's experiential, but it's somewhat metaphorical and theoretical, and then you bring it to the very concrete.
Yeah.
And that's a very important part of our process. And if I sat here and talked by myself, it wouldn't crystallize into as useful a clarity as when we have this conversation.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely as important in this as I am, beyond any question.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
It's a good team, and we couldn't do it. We wouldn't be here if you weren't joining us and didn't find some value. So we're appreciative beyond words of your support and passing this information along. You know, Mike, you were working on some promotional pieces. We've done some radio. We've pushed it on some social media. You're even making some handouts we were talking about, just to get the word out. This is it is a new show. With no agenda behind it in terms of sponsorships or revenues or anything other than getting some word out. So we would appreciate if you know somebody that might benefit from this, that you would pass that along and help us.
You know, I spent a few minutes talking to somebody this week who re-experiences grief on a yearly basis of a deep personal loss. And the first thing I did was want to jump in, and I slowed myself down. I listened to them, and then I shared a few things about, the date not being the event replaying. It feels like it is, but it isn't. And the thing is, when we share something that's useful, what I'm going to suggest or ask is, this is like little bits of, it's like finding $1 on the street or a 20, Find a way to think it through and share it with somebody that can use it, please.
Yeah.
Now
that's another useful tip. But that couldn't be better said as far as the core reasoning, the motor behind us in having these conversations and wanting to share them with you, that we started off having a cup of coffee and helping one another in a matter of speaking.
Right.
Hopefully we can pass that along, and you can use the same stuff that you already know. We're not making this up. We're not reinventing a wheel here. We're taking something that we can share with one another and passing it along, and hopefully you pass it along and so forth. And today's topic to do just that, Mike, is what?
Well, we talked about a couple things. One is maybe to rehash what we've done, and I'd like to do that later.
Sure.
And also, if we have time, I think it's really important that we start talking about building better communities. And I have a couple of ideas that I've jotted down there. I thought maybe the main topic for today was talking about addiction.
Yeah.
But not in the traditional sense of, somebody's got a needle full of heroin in their arm, but all addiction.
Yeah.
And when I say addiction, I don't mean where you have a specific identifiable chemical dependency only.
Right.
It could be, but it's also your body makes endorphins and other chemicals that it feeds itself when it gets used to being pleased in some way, or your head and body get pleased. So you can become addicted to a lot of things, maybe get addicted to gambling.
Right.
I met a couple once many years ago when I was in Colorado, and the gal had inherited about 15 grand, and her and her boyfriend, her husband, were visiting, and we got to meet and chatted, and they invited me over for lunch, and he kept leaving. And he'd come back, and he's like, I just need another $1,000. I know, I can feel it. And her entire inheritance was destroyed in 2 days.
Wow.
Right. So his charisma and her passivity destroyed her financial future
Right.
in 2 days.
Right.
And he found himself, being praised with a bunch of card sharks who knew how to play a sucker. And he was an addict. He was a gambling addict. And the funny part is he worked in a suicide prevention place, helping people, but yet he had, even, this is perfect. It's like you got somebody in a helping field, and yet they need help. Because they're human.
Right.
They're human, So he was an addict, and his addiction, or at least that part of it, if I remember right, they were both chain smokers. So we'll start with smoking. 67% of smokers die from smoking-related illnesses.
Right. COPD, cancers.
Yeah, I mean, it's
heart disease is a big one with smoking.
huge. And then other cancers that come along.
Right.
Where the risks just go up and up. And it's dose and duration dependent.
Right.
So, 1983, I had a smoke in my mouth, and my roommate, who was a thoracic surgeon and an ER doc, looked at me and he goes, little guy, he's from Nova Scotia, a very quiet voice. He walks by me and he says, that's suicidal behavior. And I could feel the anger rise up my back.
Right.
Like if I was an animal, the hair on my back would have been standing straight up and I've been showing my teeth.
And in a matter of speaking, Mike, and not everybody, maybe they've watched some episodes, but have learned about you. You were, a physically built, competitive guy that a statement like that in your younger years might have.
It riled me.
It riled you. There you go. Yeah.
I wasn't going to act on it, but I was angry.
Right.
Right. It wasn't in my nature to act on it, but it was in my nature to feel
the heat.
Ooh. So I stood there and I looked at him and I thought, first, he's son, and then I thought, he's my friend.
Yeah.
He told me the truth. And I remember turning and there was a mirror on the wall. And I looked in the mirror and I said, and I could feel this struggle, right? Because I was humiliated.
Right.
Which wanted me to be defensive, which means go on the offense, right? To make it go away.
Right.
You change the subject by being angry.
Right.
When I looked in the mirror and I said to myself, you're a drug addict. This is a drug. You're addicted. There's this little piece of paper smaller than your small finger, and it's controlling all 200 plus pounds of muscle in your body, right? And I'm like, oh, I hate this.
Right.
This is horrible.
You sensed the truth in that statement and had to look back at yourself in the mirror.
Right. Yeah.
And say, what am I going to do about this?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So I decided I have to think this through, right? I'm not going to go to a quit smoking center or whatever it is, because I don't know how they work or where they are or how much they cost. But I'm going to think this through. And one of the first thoughts that I have is, this is an addiction. And you always hear people say, if they're addicted, they're always addicted. So I thought, well, if that's true, why should I go into denial and say I'm going to quit? What I need to do is stop.
Right.
But what that does is it gives me it retains a certain kind of power, and that is I'm dealing with a permanent addiction.
Right.
That gives that. See, if I take that away from myself, I'm in denial, and then I'm more vulnerable.
Right.
I don't want to be more vulnerable. I want to have my weapons.
Right.
Because this thing is my enemy.
Right.
It means to kill me.
Right.
It's like a tiger up on a branch in a tree. It wants to eat me.
Right.
Or you know, any of us.
Right.
So, first thing I did was I counted my smokes for 3 days, and I was smoking a pack and a half a day, right? Which is a lot, you know? I want to say it's not as bad as some, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say it was a lot. I was smoking, and any is too much, and any creates a risk.
Right.
And then it increases, you know, according to how much. So first thing I did was I counted for 3 days. And then I thought to myself, okay, so I'm smoking about 28, 30 cigarettes a day. If I reduced it by 2 or 3, and I just spaced that out over the waking hours, right? Am I going to notice the 3? Is it going to be that big of a thing?
Right.
I didn't know, but I kind of hoped that it wouldn't be, so it wouldn't blow up in my face.
Right.
So I tried it, and it was okay, you know?
Right.
So I did that for about 3 days, and then I dropped it another couple. And I observed the same thing, you know? I'd smoke maybe every 20, 30 minutes or whatever. Over the next 2 or 3 days, I did it again. And I never felt that, like, twist in my gut that says, I gotta have some.
Right.
You know, that little blood level going down. So then I thought, okay, how many different ways are there that trigger a desire to smoke?
Right.
Right? So I thought, well, obviously, if the nicotine level goes down in my blood, that's the most obvious.
Right.
But what about if I'm talking to somebody and they're smoking?
Right.
Social connection.
Right.
And then about hand-mouth habit, right?
Right.
Stress, boredom.
Right.
So there's like maybe 5, 6 basic things that might stimulate your desire. The other thing I noticed is I don't remember ever once in my life having woken up in the middle of the night and saying I have to have a cigarette.
Right.
So there is, even though my nicotine level is going down, a contributor, a significant contributor, very significant contributor is my belief.
Right.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I never wake up, you know, Jones in a cigarette.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Wow. This is a point for me, right? I learned to feel like it was more necessary than it was. So that was like more armor,
Right.
you know? So I did this for a month or 2, 6 weeks. And I also went to a lighter brand and I started taking a pin and poking holes in the bottom of the cigarette. So some of the smoke was just leaving
Sure.
before it hit. And then I would smoke it less far down, right? And after about 6 weeks, I was down to like 2 cigarettes a day. Last day, I cut it to 0, and
Never looked back.
no, it's been 38 years.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
tough.
you.
And you're right. When you said that, one of the first things you said at the beginning was you're stopping. You're
Right.
never. It's
never
forever.
quit.
It's
Right.
forever part
Right.
of you.
Right.
You're still stopping.
Right. Right. And I know, I mean, there's still part of my mouth is still irritated 38 years later.
Right.
So imagine if I didn't.
Right.
And so it helped me. And so, you know, saying stopping instead of saying quitting, I think is very important. It's very important because it keeps that armor on you. It keeps you having that weapon of saying, this will always be a predator that wants to eat me.
Yeah.
You know? So if it's alcohol or excessive spending or debt or gambling or rage, right? Or sexual addiction, cheating on a spouse,
Right.
you know, any of those things, they're all addictions.
Yeah.
They're addictions.
And they're very prevalent. I mean, there's
Yeah.
I would argue to say that anybody who's watching us today, Mike,
Right,
isn't suffering or doesn't know somebody
right.
that has one of those forms that
Oh,
you're
yeah.
talking about.
Absolutely.
The addiction rears its ugly head everywhere, and it really can. It's very destructive.
It is. My son asked me my long relationship of many years was not a good one, and he asked me a couple times. He goes, "Did you ever cheat on her?" And I said, "No, I never did." I said, "I wanted to, and she'd have deserved it because of her behaviors, but I didn't because of her, you, me, and my relationship, as imperfect as it is, with God."
Right.
You know, so did I want to? Absolutely. Did I? No, I didn't. Because I looked at myself and I said, who am I going to be tomorrow if I do that?
Right.
Do I want to be that person?
Right.
You know, that piece of crap that I'm looking at.
Well, and that is at the end of the day,
Right.
you know, you're making choices for you, good or bad.
Right.
You know, and only you. They affect others,
Oh, God.
but at the
yeah.
end of the day, Who do you want to be, and how do you become that?
He and I talked about this last night, just because some character showed up in the scheme of things that he had to deal with. But another one is the addiction to self.
Yeah.
And, it's often described as narcissism, where somebody becomes the center of attention all the time, either because they're in this constant crisis, or they're demanding this or that, and they're always taking, they're rarely giving, or if they're giving, it's narcissistic giving, which is giving
somehow to benefit themselves yet
and to
again.
hook you.
Right.
Like, I'm going to give you whatever, a case of beer, but now you're on the hook to do 6 hours of
You owe me.
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. This is like not, like, if I give you this, can you help me for 2 hours? This is like, I'm going to give you this, and then I'm going to drop it on your foot later on. Right? That sucks. So, food, we mentioned alcohol. I would describe perfectionism as an addiction. Because you get high for this instant, and then you immediately collapse.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that in that sense, it's very similar to anorexia and bulimia.
Yeah.
In that it's, I'm not good enough, and I have to do this and this and this and this and this and this to be acceptable. Not really ever lovable, but acceptable.
Right.
Maybe barely acceptable.
Right.
But it's always like you're running away. You're being chased by this thing instead of saying, why do I do that? Right. So all those things, and I would say some of these things we could deal with on our own. Risk, physical risk, is an addiction. Some people get on motorcycles and ride in insane situations and die.
Right.
We knew a kid back on the West Coast that did that very thing.
They get a high out of that rush or skydiving and mountain climbing, and not all of them necessarily terrible, but they need that to feel alive.
Right, and also to be witnessed.
Sure,
and
Sure.
applauded. Right. Wow, man.
That's a combo platter there. Kind of the narcissistic
I like that
behavior.
Term. A combo platter. I like that.
That came from my good buddy, old Greg. He'd know if he watches us, he'll know it came from him.
So extreme strength. Like, I have the natural capacity to build my body to where I can curl 75 pounds with one hand. That's the point where I start moving towards damaging connective tissue.
Right.
Because of my structural size, right? So I could get more. I could do 80 or 90. I could force more.
Right.
But the links that are all connected, the bone and the ligament, the tendon, the muscle, and the cartilage, one of those links...
There's a capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a limit.
Yeah.
Right? So if I put an 800 horsepower engine in my Ford Falcon, the frame is going to break.
It might, might snap the shaft as you're taking off.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the other one, appearance, so strength can be one. What goes if I become very strong and then my body is ruined?
Yeah.
Now I'm very weak.
Right.
So the very opposite of what I wanted is what I got.
Right.
And the other addiction that came to mind, well, there's two. Being addicted to an abusive human being, and plastic surgery as an addiction.
Right.
Wanting to look perfect or being seen as being perfect. And that gets back to this idea that I can't be it's an unconscious drive. And the way I phrase it is, if I'm not superior to you, I'm not equal to you.
Right.
I can only be your equal if I'm your better.
Right.
That's very destructive thinking, It's just not true.
Right.
So those, and I would say that in each of those things, be it Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, NAAA, there's other 12-step programs. There's programs for people, I think they're called CODA, and I don't remember what the initials mean anymore. but it's people that are addicted. 12-step programs for people that have behavioral or substance addictions. And I would say if you're addicted to any of these things or something else, that there's probably some helplines, like you could talk to, who was the bicycle, the champion bicyclist, who's
You're talking Lance?
Yeah, Armstrong.
Armstrong, yeah,
Right.
you're thinking.
His line, or Mayo.com, you know, so those would both be good places to get information on, and I'm not going to pretend to be a support expert in any of those areas.
Right, we're not medical here. We're not
No.
trying to suggest one or the other, as you mentioned, Mike, and I would say this is just an opinion statement,
Right.
that the fact that you were able to beat that addiction on your own is probably rare. I mean, that
Somewhat
takes, in a sense,
it is.
we all need, I guess I would like to add, I think most people need a little extra bump. I think I would if I were to overcome a major addiction, and that's, you know, tobacco. A lot of these are.
Right.
If something's consuming me to the point where
Right.
I feel I can't live or don't want to live without
Right,
it,
right, right.
there's a problem there.
Oh, God.
And oftentimes to get over that hump or off that ledge, Mike, it's I guess it's not shameful or embarrassing to
absolutely
seek
not.
help and
No.
and find some outlets, and that's what our suggestion really would be today, is to, you can overcome it. It is your choice to overcome it, but it's okay to ask for a little guidance and help.
It is. It is. It's definitely, it's actually, I believe, admirable
Yeah,
to ask for help.
that's hard to do, because that
Yeah.
is, you know, that is oftentimes that's the shell. You don't want
Right.
people to see what's behind, but then again, that is you, and you were made you.
Right. Well, like when I looked in
Intentional.
the mirror and I said, I mean, that was my help. I looked in the
Right.
mirror and I talked to myself, you know, and I said, ooh, I have a problem. You know, I have a gorilla on my back.
Right.
And I'm addicted to this drug. It's, you know, then that gets to the other part of it, which is lies and excuses and put off. Everybody dies. I need it now, maybe later.
Right.
I'm under too much stress. These are all put offs. These are all shut up and go aways.
Right.
To the real question of, you know, is that helping you, or is it neutral, or is it causing you cumulative, significant, very significant harm?
Right.
You know, and you know, at what point do you turn the corner and all of a sudden now you've got a medical crisis?
Right.
You know, and don't you want to start stopping before you get to that point?
Right.
You know, so all the excuses, and there's a bunch of them.
Oh, yeah.
And the other one is humor.
Yeah.
You know, I can just brush it off by saying something funny, and that puts the other person kind of on the spot. So they kind of have to, it shuts them down.
Right.
So those are the tools that people use to avoid.
Yeah. Taking the focus off the topic and the conversation, and really that's taking your own mind off the realization that, or facing in the mirror, as you said it, that I've got a problem, and that
Right.
can be very, very difficult to admit, but admitting a weakness really strengthens you.
Right.
It's not the opposite. Like you said, it's admirable.
Yeah.
It's stronger to admit that you're human and have a weakness. What are you going to do about it, though?
Right. So there are therapeutic confrontations that take place that usually involve a professional.
Right.
Where some loved ones will get together with somebody and say, you have a problem. We help
Right.
you. You know, we're here to help you. We love you. We don't love your addiction.
Right.
But we do
Right.
love you.
Right.
And that's sometimes the beginning step of them. And also of them stepping back and saying, I'm not going to continue to give you money because you spend it on alcohol, or you spend it on drugs, or you spend it on
Gambling, or- yeah.
right, or cars, or whatever it is you
Right.
don't need that you have to have because you're stressed, or whatever the lie is.
Right.
You know, and it's a lie. So, and there's, you know, and there's usually some pretty, you know, when you have a codependent person that's supporting them, they're always persuaded. They'll
Right.
be persuaded forever.
Well, and let's be honest, there's a lot of things in our culture and the society that help to feed those lies.
right.
You do need to look, whether, and even if it's not being said directly, but if you look through any magazine publication or television show, who are they? What type of people are they showing? Perfect people.
Right.
Or, the successful people, what do they have? Great cars. What are they doing socially, drinking? So all these things are, I guess, without being praised directly, they're showing that this is what you're supposed to be, and that feeds the lie that you're then telling yourself that if I want to be that, I'm either that or, as you mentioned, inferior to that.
I'm trash.
And that's the lie.
Somebody once told me they had to replace all their makeup every 30 days because it went bad. Had to. Yeah, exactly. Bingo, right? So that's the addiction thing, and of course that was addictive behavior.
Right. Right.
The better community, just a few ideas, but I think they're so essential. And this all started with me talking over 12 years to people about there's people out there who we live next door to who want to die. They want to kill themselves. And what can we do to make that less prevalent?
Right.
I don't know how we erase it, but maybe we can prevent a third or half or three-quarters. But if we prevent one, that's golden, So one is paying attention, truly paying attention to those around us, not dismissing them. So we talked about the backhanded hello, which is how you doing, which is throwing away garbage, right? Or what I call the penny in the pot. Somebody comes up to you and they do this, which is dismissive, right? Or what I call the traffic cop, which is, hey, how you doing?
Move along.
Yeah, bingo. Move along, right? It's like when you think about it, you're like, God, that's terrible, you know? Or I'm so busy. Maybe I'll talk to you in a century or two.
Right.
So you always have to look at people and ask yourself, are they really having a true crisis, or are they drama users? Are they just always creating a new scenario to suck other people dry? And at what point do they chip in with time, with energy, with company, with stuff? What do they do with $10? Do they give, or are they just always, oh, I know it's terrible, it just seems that cloud just follows me everywhere. Maybe they're a user, So barter, my rule with barter is you need to know who you're bartering with and whether or not they're going to take advantage of you because of their position, And we've talked about this a time or two, a knowledge circle, where you get together with 5 or 6 or 8 people and you share what you know.
Right.
And you're not marketing yourself.
Right.
You're
giving your expertise or your knowledge, and you're receiving somebody else's that may or may not be beneficial, but you are mutually giving and receiving.
Like I might say to you, can I use the same microphone outdoors as indoors?
Right.
What would the difference be?
Right.
And you might say something about...
You might want a windscreen, or you might want something because of the blower,
Right.
Are you looking for something directionalized or something that's catching all the ambiance? Yeah,
Uni or Omni, is that what it's...
Right.
Yeah, okay. So knowledge circle is one. That's how we can help each other, right? Sharing books.
Right.
You shared a book with me and offered me a couple. I've given you some. Time bank, where we just say 1-to-1. I give you an hour, you give me an hour.
Sure.
Whatever. When we can. Needs list. You write down 3 things you need, and I do the same.
Right.
And then barter. How to lend and how not to. Who do you lend to? Under what condition? How much? How much can you afford to not see back? Right?
Right.
Like, I can afford to lend somebody $50 and never get it back.
Right.
Can't really do that with 100.
Right.
So that's my limit.
Right.
But I need to also say to them, look, okay, it's going to be 3 months, and then can you give me back $10 a month?
Right.
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 I want to make it painless so they can do it.
Right.
Right. So setting limits in communities, I think that communities that don't provide affordable, we used to have some of this around here, and it dried up and went away, like last year's weeds. Adult education, right? Like how to fix a kitchen sink, or basic welding,
Right.
or basic automotive maintenance,
Right.
or how to put a new fixture in your, a new light socket in, right? Something
Right.
like that. Because when people are challenged financially, when they're retired or they're injured, they're on disability, they don't have $100 an hour to pay somebody. And the town is just sort of, well, we're sorry, we don't know.
Right.
That's not really our department,
Yeah.
And it should be, it should be. It's like, if it isn't your department, it's your department to pick up the phone and
Essentially, Mike, today's version of that would be YouTube. And what you're saying is, can you not do that with one another and help one another?
Right.
Because the one beautiful thing is there's a lot of information out there if you seek it, if they have the capability to be connected to that.
Right.
But why can't a neighbor help somebody? Geez, Mike, I know you've done some minor plumbing and some electrical work in your house. I've got a project I can't. Can you help me out? I'm not comfortable or confident.
Right.
I'll sit there with you. I'll do what I can, but can you help me out?
Sure.
That's what you're wanting to exist, and I think that's a fair
Absolutely.
ask.
It's wonderful. Yeah, it's a great ask, and that way you get to know somebody.
Right.
So I remember living in another town, in another part of the country, and I was talking to this gal one day. She was a single mom, 30s, and she had a kid. I think she had like an 8-year-old kid. She drove around this old Japanese station wagon, and one day the oil light goes on in her car. So there's this guy that owns this fancy repair shop, and he went to some big school back on the East Coast. He had a lot of education, supposedly, and he's always bragging about that. So anyway, she brings the car to him, tells him about the oil light. He's like, oh yeah, this is a big problem. This is 20 years ago, right? $900 later.
Yeah.
She works in a movie theater making $8 an hour or something. $900 later, they took the motor, disassembled the motor, cleaned all the parts, put it back together. I think they cleaned the oil screen on the oil pump. And they didn't find a single thing that needed replacing. Could have put a $5 flush through the motor 3 times and accomplished the same thing with an hour's worth of labor.
Right.
He screwed her.
Right.
Completely.
Right.
Might have took her a year or longer to save that $900.
Right.
Now, does he deserve silence? Does he deserve good old boy reputation? Or does he deserve, that's a rat, bring your business somewhere else? Which are we morally called to do?
Right.
Are we morally told to say, oh, he's a great guy,
Right.
I had hot dogs with him once in his backyard, right after he ripped me off for $400, but they were great hot dogs. Or do you tell the truth?
Right.
Because my challenge is silence a lie? So if you're setting somebody up to get screwed because he's a good old boy, you're lying.
Right. And most likely that action will be repeated, Mike.
It absolutely is.
And therefore will continue to create harm.
Right.
So,
much harm. A great deal of harm. So those are all parts of it. There's other things we can.
Well, and we will, Mike, because I know we're probably pushing our time boundary, but this is a focus, a center concept of everything we talking about. We started the show, and we talk about it in many shows, and that is giving information that helps one another, and doesn't that, and if we all reciprocate collectively, that's what we're trying to accomplish, a better place, period.
Right.
And it starts with you and I, our friends, our circles, and if it expands and continues to expand, we've created that community, Mike, that you're talking about.
And when people are broke and their basic goods and services are starting to fall apart, then they start giving up. And that gets back to the whole thing of hopelessness.
Right.
Do we have 5 or 6 minutes for me to go through an outline of what we've talked about, or should we do that on another show?
I think we'll save a recap and an outline, because I think that, to me, deserves some some extra time, almost a whole episode.
Oh,
it is the
okay.
core, the reminder, the recap, almost the recap of everything.
Right.
Like at the beginning of a TV show,
Right.
and maybe it won't take a whole show, but to recap how we've gotten to where we are today and why we're doing what we're doing. I mean, we've teased it each show, but I think that is almost deserving of a show, Mike.
There was one more thing I wanted to talk about. It's a little bit of a non-traditional subject,
Okay?
but I think it ties all this stuff together. I remember many years ago somebody called me up and said, there's a guy giving a class on water dowsing. And this was down in Monterey, so people take like a couple willow branches and they walk around, and when they stand above the ground where the water is flowing, the branches come together.
Sure.
This is an old art that farmers have practiced since ancient times.
Right.
Not everybody's good at it.
Right.
I know somebody in this room who's terrible at it. Me.
Well, maybe I've never tried it.
Bingo. Well, I had no aptitude whatsoever. I took this class, and at the end of the class, I was 100% as bad. But you can see some people really had it, you know.
Right.
But so they got to experience themselves doing something that seemed, oh, that's ridiculous, but it wasn't.
Right.
It was just out, and it's kind of like, so then you ask yourself, like, 90-year-old people can lift soup cans and get stronger.
Right.
No, 90-year-old people can't get stronger. Yes, they can.
Right.
They can, and they do when they
Right.
work at it.
Right.
You know, or people can water douse with a couple of willow branches, or they can learn to put in a light socket or whatever. And so it's like when you get nervous because you feel and you told yourself for a long time, I can't do something, you've practiced that lie, the letter
Right.
that we talked about. But it doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
It means it feels true.
Yeah.
It means you've rehearsed it and you've persuaded yourself for a long time. So you can practice a little bit at a time, challenging that persuasion,
Sure.
you know. And I think that should be a core principle in everything we talk about.
Yeah.
You know, are the things that I say I can't do, are they true?
Right.
You know, or can I do them a little?
Right.
You know, maybe I don't think I can run 100 yards in 10 seconds anymore, but you know, maybe I could run it at 16.
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
You know.
But you still can do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let the lie define you.
Right.
Yeah. Good ending closing note. Powerful thing to think about and take into the next episode. We appreciate you joining us today for Reclaiming Timeless Ways. Have a wonderful day.